Hello everybody and welcome back to another Marvel Crisis Protocol character spotlight, and today we are taking a look at Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff. And yeah, we're gonna get right into this one and just start out with the stats. But Wanda is really strong, and I think she's kind of criminally underplayed, especially with the prevalence of some models we've been seeing recently. And I understand why that is, why she doesn't see that much play, and we're gonna talk about that. But I think she's a very, very strong piece, and I'd love to see more of her. I'm going to be working her into some of my own lists soon. So yeah, let's just go ahead and start breaking her down here. So first of all, she's a 5 threat, so she's definitely on the higher tier of threat levels here. Not quite in that kind of kaiju range, but she's definitely up there. She's coming in with 3-4-4 defensive lines, so at first glance, not a great stat line for a 5 threat with only 6 health as well, and this doesn't change on the back, this is the exact same. So overall stamina pool is only 12 with relatively low defensive numbers, so not looking too impressive at the start here. She is a size 2, which is pretty standard, and a medium move, so nothing too special here. But once we get into the rest of her kit, we really start to see where she kind of has power. So firstly, she has Hex Bolt. This is a range 4 6 dice mystic attack. It's going to be a builder, so she's going to gain power equal to the damage that she deals. And it has a trigger on skulls. It has chaos magic. After the attack is resolved, for each skull in the attack roll, the target character is going to gain one of the following special conditions. And it's got 4 options for you here, and it's for each one. So in theory, you can apply all 4 with a single attack. And those conditions are bleed, hex, incinerate, and poison. So there's a handful of really solid conditions you can hand out there. I mean, incinerate and hex are both incredibly good conditions. Bleed at the right time on the right target can be really obnoxious, and poison is just a nice thing to kind of slow your enemies down and kind of force them to think a little more carefully about where they're spending their power. So all pretty solid things, especially when you can hand out more than one at a time. So you can just kind of start layering these on and, start with the heavy hitting ones like Incinerate or Hex a lot of the time, and then throw the other ones on just as you're hitting the same targets more and more. But also, you really don't have to hit the same targets all that much because this is a range 4 6 dice mystic builder, and we'll talk about it in a second, but this actually has better dice odds than your typical attack, and this can kind of just melt stuff. So, really powerful attack here. Next, we have her Spender. It is Cruel Twist. This is a 6 cost attack. It's going to be 8 dice on the Mystic side, and it is range 3, so a little bit closer range than her Spender here. The defending character does not add critical results to its total successes and does not add additional dice as a result of criticals, so not only are you turning off a side of the dice, meaning there are now 2 out of 8 sides of the die, but you're also saying they don't get to add extra dice, so their chances to explode are, well, 0. So that's really, really good. And then it also has Skull Reality Contortion, which is basically just Pierce, change one of their crit, wild, or shields to a blank. So that's really good. Skull Pierce is solid. I mean, it's the same odds technically as Wild Pierce, so that's really good. And yeah, this attack hits like an absolute truck. This should melt things effectively, especially once again when we get to that other ability that she has that really turns both of these attacks just up to 11. But that is it for her attacks, so on to her superpowers here. Scarlet Witch only has one active superpower, but it is a really good one. It's going to be telekinesis. It's going to cost her 3 power, and it's pretty simple. She chooses a terrain feature of size 4 or less within range 3, so that's really nice. Size 4, range 3, both great things already, and you're throwing it medium, so that's also really, really good. It is unfortunately only a terrain throw, so you can't throw characters with this. There's no real control in her kit here. It's all damage and conditions. But this is just another thing that just adds to her ability to melt a model if she really wants to. I mean, size 4 terrain throws are nothing to scoff at, especially when she can pick terrain that's within 3 of her. She's got a nice little band of being able to pick up things and toss it around. So that's really, really good and just adds to the already really high damage in her kit. So I think you're kind of starting to see a pattern here of what she kind of does best. Next, she has Curse. This is her reactive ability here. It's going to cost her 2 power, and when she's damaged by an enemy effect, after the effect is resolved, you may use this superpower. The character that caused the effect gains the Judgment special condition. So this is another condition she can hand out. It's not one of the ones she hands out with Hexbolt. So now she's looking at 5 distinct conditions. And Judgment is one of the lesser known conditions because there's only 2 characters in the game that actually hand it out. And basically it means they don't gain power when they're taking damage from your attacks. So if they hit Scarlet Witch first and she can put this Judgment token on them and then she starts going to town with them with her attacks, they're not even going to be gaining power for all of the damage that she's able to do with them. So that's really, really good. Now it does specify enemy attacks, not enemy effects. So that terrain throw will power them up, but still really powerful condition in the right situations. And yeah, I mean, there's some value just in being one of the only 2 characters in the game that can hand it out. Next, she has the part that really turns her kit up to 11. This is Chosen of Chthon. This is a passive ability. When attacking, defending, or dodging, this character adds skulls in its roll to its total successes. And where have we seen this ability before? Cosmic Ghost Rider, who up until very recently, at least at time of recording, I don't know exactly based on when this video is going to come out, but up until relatively recently was one of the strongest, most meta-shaping models in the game. And this is a large part of why. Because when you're counting skulls, your dice odds are much, much improved. I mean, it's only 1 in 8, which doesn't sound like that much, but when you're adding it to, you know, the attack dice are already a 4 in 8 chance, and then you have the chance to explode your criticals and stuff like that, it's a big deal. This becomes even better when you can add stuff like rerolls into the mix, which she doesn't have any of her own, and we'll talk about some synergies and stuff there. But it's really, really good, especially on the offensive side. And now when you look at, you know, Cruel Twist and Hexbolt again, they suddenly hit really, really hard. In particular, Hexbolt is pretty much just better than Cosmic Ghost Rider's basic attack. So that's worth acknowledging. It hits like an absolute truck. It hands out conditions. It's a builder, so she's going to be gaining power for it. It's a really good attack. I mean, the only kind of downside, but in some cases this is an upside, is that it's Mystic instead of Energy, which is what Cosmic Ghost Rider throws out. So yeah, pretty good on that front. Defensively, she's also looking very, very similar there. She does have a much smaller health pool of only 6, but 3, 4, 4, and now that you're counting skulls, you're on the same odds as attack dice, so that even the odds quite a bit there. I think it's definitely worth acknowledging. All that to say, she's still not like a bulky character by any means, having only 6 health on each side. And, you know, improved dice odds are great and all, but you can definitely still whiff 1 or 2 rolls and just have her go down. So, you know, she's not going to be a tank for your team or anything like that, but she can take a hit or 2, usually pretty all right. And yeah, I think it's worth acknowledging just how much that does for her defensively, and also, you know, it does apply to dodges, so that's great as well. Just for the little bit extra bit there, when anything gets thrown at her, she has better dice odds there, which is really, really nice because a lot of other characters don't have defensive tech that actually works against dodges, so that's pretty useful to have. Next, she has the Hex Field ability here. So enemy characters trying to shake conditions while within range 3 of this character, specifically through the shake action. That's very important because there are some characters that can get around this. May not remove the Hex, Judgment, or Poison special conditions. So that's really nice. I mean, all 3 of those are conditions that she can hand out. And she can just say you're not allowed to get rid of them anymore. Or at least you're not allowed to get rid of them the normal way. So that's pretty cool. Especially relevant on characters whose way of getting rid of conditions is like bonus shake actions and stuff like that, which I believe is how Blade and Agent Venom are worded, is that they are doing shake actions, it's just not costing them actions. So definitely valuable in those situations. A little less valuable against like tactics cards or leaderships that get rid of conditions, but still can definitely be an annoyance there, and you know, those are already conditions she's handing out, so it's kind of just an extra thing. Notably, it is only range 3, whereas her attack is range 4, so kind of have to keep that in mind when you're making those attacks, that if you don't want them to be able to get rid of those conditions, then you do have to be a little bit closer, but still really useful to have there. Lastly, she has Flight, which, yeah, that's useful. I mean, she's a medium move, so she's not particularly slow, and Flight will help her stay, you know, avoid anything that could potentially slow her down. So that's good. She doesn't want to be doing too many unnecessary move actions because she is just a really high damage dealing piece. So ideally you want her to be attacking, twice if you can every turn, because that's where you're going to get the most value. But when you do want to move, you want to make sure you don't have to move more than once. So not having or having flight and not having to do climb actions will definitely help you with that. So yeah, very, very valuable thing for her to have there as well. She's coming in with three different tactics cards, and all three of them are at least interesting. So the first one here is Difficult to Please. This is a team-up card with Quicksilver and Magneto, so three different models, but it is also Brotherhood of Mutants affiliated, and I believe all three of them are Brotherhood of Mutants affiliated characters, so that kind of works out as well. If an allied Scarlet Witch has dazed or KO'd an enemy character this round, and an allied Quicksilver has interacted with or picked up an objective token this round, Magneto may play this card. So you've got a bunch of different conditions to this. In order for Magneto to play the card, he needs to be healthy, Quicksilver needs to have picked up an objective, and Scarlet Witch needs to have gotten a daze or KO. Now, similarly to other cards like this is all things that they're pretty good at doing. Scarlet Witch is, as we've mentioned, a really hard-hitting damage piece. Quicksilver is definitely an objective piece. We haven't done an episode on him yet, but that's definitely something he's pretty good for. And Magneto is reasonably annoying to kill, so he's probably around to play this card. And then what the actual ability is you get to remove an activated token from Magneto, which is really strong if you can get it off. The card can definitely be a little difficult to do. It can be a little bit predictable. If you're bringing it, your opponent's going to kind of see it coming a mile away. But it doesn't actually care whose activation it is. It just cares that these things have happened. So that gives you a little bit of leeway to kind of play this when it works best for you. And maybe when your opponents kind of let their guard down a little bit. So it's a really powerful card if you can get it off. It's definitely a little hard to do. But yeah, I think it's at least a fun card. Whether or not it's competitive, not so sure about that one, but it's definitely a fun one. In other cards, she has No More Mutants here. No More Mutants is probably her best card. It's really, really good. When an enemy character within range 5 of an allied Scarlet Witch spends 1 or more power to use an active or reactive superpower, she may spend 3 power to play this card. The enemy superpower has no effect and cannot be used again for the rest of the turn, but the enemy character still spends the power cost of the superpower and is considered to have used it. So this is really, really good. There are two cards like this in the game. There's this and there's which is Ebony Maw's card. And they're both fantastic cards. They're basically kind of ways of counter spell almost. This can effectively serve as a brace. This could serve as an indomitable. This could serve as, I don't know, an anti-bodyguard if you really need it to, right? The versatility on a card like this is really, really good. You can use this to turn off a lot of different things, and yeah, it's a really powerful card and definitely worth considering. The range band on it is relatively large, so that's pretty good. And the target of the ability doesn't have to be Scarlet Witch. I mean, technically, there doesn't have to be a target. You could use this to shut down a web swing or something like that if you really want, which could be really, really useful because that would turn off, the extra dice or something like that from specifically a web swing. So lots of versatility to a card like this, super powerful, and if you're running Scarlet Witch, I definitely recommend at least considering No More Mutants. It's a really, really useful card, and the only downside to it really is that Scarlet Witch needs to have 3 power on her, but as we've established, her builder kind of hits like a truck, so that's not too hard for her to do. And the last card she has is the Whims of Chaos. She can spend any number of power to play this card. Choose one non-dazed character within range 3 of her for each power spent to play this card. So you can choose, up to 10, I guess, if you really wanted. Each chosen allied character may remove 1 damage or special condition, whereas each chosen enemy character gains one of the following conditions: Hex, Root, or Incinerate. Personally, I really like this card. I don't know if I've seen much of it really in a kind of competitive sense, but I also haven't seen much of Scarlet Witch in a competitive sense, as I kind of stated at the beginning of this. I think she's a little underplayed in the competitive scene, unfortunately. But I do think this card is really, really good. I think the three conditions you can hand out are all very valuable. That's, by the way, another condition that she's capable of handing out that she doesn't hand out in the rest of her kit. So she's now up to what, six conditions she can hand out, which is kind of insane. All three conditions are very valuable. So, Incinerate is obviously amazing, Root is amazing, and Hex is very solid. So I think all three of those are great to be able to hand out. And then condition removal or healing for your team, yeah, that's also really, really good. Downsides to it, it does only characters within range 3 of Scarlet Witch. So that's, something to keep in mind, that that might be a little closer than she wants to be to a lot of enemy models, but they're not going to be able to get rid of some of these conditions, so that's pretty cool. And then same for the healing thing, you're going to have to keep your allies relatively close to her. One thing that is important to note is it doesn't have to be her activation. So, someone staggered one of your characters and you want them to be able to go ahead and play this card, and she can do that. Another important thing here is that she can choose herself. So if someone staggered Scarlet Witch, she can play this card to get rid of that. So that's really solid as well. Personally, for me, I run Scarlet Witch in Avengers, or I'm just starting to run her in Avengers because I only recently got my Scarlet Witch. But I think this card's really nice there. It's kind of replaced Battle Plan for me as a way to remove some conditions on some of my guys, and yeah, it's a great condition removal card if you don't really have great access to that in your affiliation already. So definitely worth considering there. Speaking of affiliations, she is actually a member of four different affiliations, which is really good. That's definitely more than most characters. And I think she's got play in most, if not all of them. So starting out, we'll take a look at A-Force here. So A-Force only has one leader, it's She-Hulk. And She-Hulk basically says whenever any of your allies are damaged, you get to pass power, or you get to give a power to one of your allies. And you can do this up to once per turn per ally. So that's really, really important. You can basically power up your entire team with this. Well, I wouldn't say Scarlet Witch is necessarily power starved, so it's not her favorite leadership in the world because she doesn't need it by the mid game most of the time. It can definitely help her get online in the early game, so it's certainly not bad. There's also a handful of other models here that synergize reasonably well with her. Stuff like Shuri can give her rerolls, which always, as we've already established, is really, really good when you're counting skulls, so that can be cool. You can also pair her with something like Crystal, who's already pretty good in A-Force because of the long-range drop-off, which is one of She-Hulk's cards in A-Force that's really, really good. And then you can kind of build this really annoying condition team. If you're going to hand out all of these different conditions, and your opponent's just going to kind of have to deal with that, because she also has that thing where they can't shake certain conditions, and they're all different from the ones that Scarlet Witch says you can't shake. So if you can kind of pair them up, they can be a really annoying kind of condition bubble, which could be a lot of fun. I haven't tried it myself yet. One of the downsides to her in this affiliation is unfortunately that being a 5 threat with a 6 threat leader means you'd be starting out at 11 threat if you were including Scarlet Witch. And that's definitely on the more expensive side, but on the right scenario, it can definitely be okay. If you're playing like an EMAP or something like that, you can definitely get away with running a little bit fewer models on the table. So still not bad, but just something worth considering if you're playing her in A-Force. And on top of that, she doesn't really have the bulk to be wanting to take a lot of hits, so she might not necessarily be benefiting the leadership all that much in the sense of, your opponent's going to have to put multiple attacks into her to generate power for the rest of your team. As we mentioned earlier, she'll probably still be able to take a hit or two relatively consistently before she goes down, but that's not quite the level that you'd want to really maximize the value out of that leadership. But overall, I don't think she's bad here by any means. I just don't necessarily know if it's her favorite home in the world. Next, we have Avengers, and I think she's a very solid Avenger. I think she can see play under most of the leaderships here relatively well, actually. As far as, I guess we'll just kind of go one by one here. So for Sam, his leadership gives you a little bit of mobility and healing whenever one of your allied models goes down. She definitely appreciates the leadership. She likes the movement, and the healing doesn't hurt, especially when you do have improved odds on defense dice. So that's nice. She's a little high threat for the type of game that Sam likes to play. So I'm not too sure how he feels about having her as a 5 threat splash in there. But I certainly don't think she minds the leadership at all. So I don't think she's a bad call necessarily. Just maybe not quite in his regular playstyle of model. But I think she'd be an interesting option that could still do reasonably well there. And she could definitely be a model that benefits a lot from the leadership, even if she's not really adding to it. Kind of in a similar way of what we said about A-Force there. Next, we have original Steve Rogers, whose leadership is reducing the power cost of your superpowers. She's nice there because she does have a reactive and an active superpower, and they're both useful abilities that she'll be wanting to use in the appropriate situations. So that can definitely help lower the cost of those a little bit. And it'll allow you, if anything, to hand out judgment tokens more often, because I find that's the one where I'd be more hesitant to pay the power a lot of the time. But you know, it only costing one definitely makes it very easy to just kind of be like, yeah, of course I'm going to throw judgment on you because it's only going to cost me 1 power. That's great. And you know, cheapening the throw is certainly nice. Bringing it down to a 2 cost size 4 terrain throw is really, really nice and might allow you to do that spender once in a while more often. So that's pretty solid. Another thing I like about Steve with Scarlet Witch is he is a bodyguard model, and he's also a bodyguard model with really solid defensive stats, especially once he gets to his flip side. So he can help keep her alive because she can be on the squishy side for a 5 threat. So you definitely don't want to you definitely don't want to leave her out somewhere where she's just going to be able to get targeted down and taken out. So Steve can kind of sit beside her and they can play off of each other reasonably well there. And yeah, he can bodyguard her while she just kind of points and deletes things. So there's a lot of value there, I think, and that's primarily probably where I'm going to be running her. Next, we have First Avenger Steve Rogers. This is obviously the newer one, and his leadership's pretty good for her because it allows you to create more skulls, which for her, on, you know, one of her attacks is a pierce, and on the other one allows her to throw out more conditions. So yeah, that's really, really good. As we've already established, I don't think she's going to be particularly power starved because she does have a pretty solid amount of power generation. So she doesn't really mind paying the extra 1 power here and there to A, get another damage through and hopefully build it back, but B, also hand out more conditions and things like that because yeah, that's pretty good. So I think First Avenger is actually probably one of the leaderships that benefits her the most out of the Avengers roster. Um, but I do think the synergy she has with original Steve as a model can certainly make up for it there. So I think there's merit to both though, and it's definitely worth playing around with it. And I'll certainly be playing around with her under Steve 3 as well. So yeah, I think that's that's a decent place for her. Similarly with Steve 1, or especially if you're trying to run her under one of the other leaders, I think something like Luke Cage is a valuable inclusion in a list bringing Scarlet Witch, just so you have that kind of extra bodyguard stuff online. You've got Heroes for Hire as well, so if they're able to kind of get around that taunt, you have the Heroes for Hire to protect her as well. So I think Luke Cage can be really valuable there, just kind of having some form of bodyguard or protection for her is quite useful. So yeah, I think there's a couple options for that. Obviously, there's Cage, there's Iron Fist also has access to Heroes for Hire. She-Hulk has a bodyguard, which I didn't actually mention when we were talking about A-Force, but is relevant. So you have a few options for something like that, but they're definitely worth considering if you're running under the other leaderships, especially since Luke Cage really appreciates both of their leaderships. So that's pretty good. And for semi-obvious reasons, we didn't talk about the Hulkbuster leadership, which for those unaware is basically you take less damage from terrain throws. And I mean, she doesn't dislike that necessarily, but it's honestly just not that great of a leadership unless you're like specifically against Magneto Brotherhood. And yeah, it's not really worth spending too much time on. So next we have Brotherhood, which, funny enough, we were just mentioning. And Brotherhood has 2 leaders, so it's got Magneto and it's got Mystique. For Magneto's leadership, basically, whenever you destroy terrain, based on the size of that terrain, you're going to spread out power to the rest of your team. So she definitely plays into that leadership reasonably well. She does have a size 4 terrain throw, and she doesn't mind a little bit of extra power here and there. You know, it's not something she needs, but certainly can help her if there's nobody else on the team to pass it to that needs it more. So certainly some value there. I also think under Magneto's card that gives cover to everyone within 3 of him, she can get a lot of value out of that because when you're already on improved dice, the ability to basically say, one of the dice that didn't succeed is now going to just be a shield. That's quite useful. So yeah, I think she has a decent amount of play there, and then of course you do have access to her card with Quicksilver herself and Magneto, and that part's more fluffy and cool, but it is something that can be an incentive to run her there, which I think is fun. So yeah, I definitely don't hate her under Magneto. It does have the same problem that running her in A-Force does of it's a 6 threat leader with a 5 threat character, and you're starting to get very expensive there, especially when you have other 5 threats in affiliation that are very, very good, like Juggernaut. So definitely some pros and cons worth weighing there, but she is a really effective piece, so I definitely wouldn't fault anyone for trying to run her there and seeing how it works. Similarly, there is Mystique, so if you want to go for a lower threat leader, you can run Mystique. As far as the leadership goes, I don't know if she necessarily gets as much out of Mystiques, and I'm just gonna pull it up so I don't mix anything up here. But yeah, after she interacts with an extract, she gets a power back. So that's fine. I mean, as we've already kind of mentioned, I don't think Scarlet Witch is particularly power starved most games, so that's not huge, but it doesn't hurt. The big thing with this is it kind of helps you keep like a lot of turn two plays online for picking up extracts round one. But Scarlet Witch doesn't really have many of those outside of shooting things and getting enough power to do a throw, maybe. So it doesn't do all that much for her. Um, the ability to put tokens on secure objectives is useful, but again, not really a thing that Scarlet Witch would benefit all that much from because she is more of a turret. She likes to stay in one place. If she's being moved, she is wasting move actions, which can feel kind of bad for her. So she doesn't love having to really leave a point all that often. She's really effective at just kind of sitting on one and being like, all right, this is my point now, and I'm going to murder anything that gets within range 4 of it. And yeah, so I don't think she gets much out of Mystique's leadership, but she is an affiliated member. She is a very powerful piece, so I think there's an argument because I don't know if anything else in Brotherhood really does the same thing that she does in terms of just being like a really hard-hitting turret. To some degree, Magneto kind of does, but Magneto is very much reliant on his own leadership. So if you're running under Mystique, I think there's a strong argument for him. And with Shadow King coming out soon, he'll kind of be competing for that role as well. But I think there's still a very valid argument for Scarlet Witch in this sense. So yeah, I think she can be a solid piece here, although I don't know if she particularly cares all that much about the leadership where she's easiest to run. So there's some pros and cons there, but certainly not bad. Lastly, we have Defenders, which has two leaderships. It's got Doctor Strange and Daredevil. So Daredevil, obviously the new shiny one. When you have enemies within range 2, you can reroll a number of attack dice equal to the number of enemies within range 2. It's a very good leadership. For Scarlet Witch specifically, I'm not sure if it's all that great. She doesn't tend to be super close quarters like that. She totally can be, but as we've already established, she's not the bulkiest model in the world. So I don't think it's an amazing leadership for her, but I don't think it's bad. I mean, she might not get all that much value out of it all that often, but she doesn't really need to. She's a very self-sufficient model, and the rest of the affiliation can kind of work around her. Even Daredevil himself having a pull on his baton hook, he can kind of bring things into range for her, which could be really, really nice for her to just be able to delete things. Again, as we've already established, she doesn't love wasting move actions, so stuff like that can help her out. So I think there's still some merit to running her under Daredevil, even if she's not going to be getting all that much out of the leadership. Doctor Strange, on the other hand, I actually think his leadership supports her a little bit more, even if it's not exactly the strongest leader in the game. But his leadership basically lets you pay 1 power to change your attack type to physical, energy, or mystic, and then if you deal damage, they gain hex. The second part is a little redundant for her. She's already handing out hex if she's getting skulls, but it gives you a little bit more options if you rolled multiple skulls. You can kind of be like, well, we're giving out hex anyways, so now you're going to also be incinerated and bleeding, that sort of thing. So it's an extra condition, which is certainly not bad. Um, but more so the ability to change attack types. Some characters are really strong against Mystic, and those ones she would have a little bit more of a hard time taking down. So against those specific targets could definitely be worth considering being able to change into physical or energy. Strange does kind of fall to the same problem of 5 threat leader, so not quite as bad as 6 threat, but can definitely still be a little bit tight to try and squeeze her in here. That said, there are some other models here that we kind of already mentioned them from Avengers, but stuff like Luke Cage has the taunt as well as the Heroes for Hire to help keep her alive if you need that. So there's some useful things here that can help with that sort of thing, and even Amazing Spider-Man with his witty banter and stuff like that can help out there. So there's a couple of things like that that could be nice here, but overall, I don't really think either of these leaderships are too amazing for her, mostly because Strange, unfortunately, just isn't all that great as a leader, and Daredevil's, I don't think she gets the most value out of, but I think there is enough things in Affiliation to at least keep her interesting here. Going out of her home affiliation, I think there's a few places where she'd be interesting. One of the obvious ones is Guardians of the Galaxy. As we've already mentioned, she kind of has very similar stat lines to Guardians of the Galaxy. So giving her rerolls through winging it tokens, she's going to hit pretty much just as hard as he did, which is kind of a big deal because he hit incredibly hard. So that's worth considering. I think she can do a lot of damage there. Another place where I think she'd be a lot of fun is Hydra because, as we've already mentioned, she has the ability to hand out up to, I think we got up to 5 different conditions, which is, or no, it was 6. It was 6 with the card. So that's kind of insane. And also handing out judgment is on your opponent's turn, which I believe still works under Strucker Hydra. I'm actually going to check this right here. But yeah, it's just once per turn. So when an enemy character gains a special condition, she would be able to heal. So when an enemy attacks her and does damage, she can then give them the judgment condition and heal immediately from it, which is really solid. I mean, assuming it didn't down her, of course. But yeah, I think that makes her really, really interesting in somewhere like Hydra. She could potentially be a lot of fun there. Few other places she might be interesting. I could see her doing okay in somewhere like Shield. They run a bit of a gun line, and she's a turret piece, so she definitely plays into that. So that's not bad. She can get a little bit of mobility out of something like Fury Senior there as well, and she provides them with some Mystic attacks, which I don't think they have a whole lot of in Affiliation. So there's definitely some value to that there. Other affiliations that kind of give you movement, I could see her being interesting in, even something like a Stormhawk or Midnight Suns, wherever they are. Bump in the Night. Oh, there they are. I was like, I'm looking at the screen and I can't find them to save my life. But I think places like that could be interesting for her, just to help her get around the board because she definitely appreciates models that can do that for her. We didn't mention this when we were talking about Sam, but Sam has the little airlift ability in Avengers, so I think she could get a lot of value out of something like that. She could get value with, I mean, I don't know if you're running her in Black Order, but if you're running her somewhere, you're also splashing Thanos. That's 2 very high threat models. She could get some value out of being Cosmic Portaled or Space Stone or something like that. So that could be pretty good. But yeah, I think there's a lot of places where she could do reasonably well. Even something like webs, just an extra defensive reroll. I mean, if you're putting her in webs, you're definitely playing a more attrition-y webs instead of their typical game plan. But I think it would work for her. I don't know if it would necessarily work for them as an affiliation, but it certainly works for her. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting places. Um, Even something like Convocation, they've got kind of, she's weirdly not a member. I feel like she should be, but she certainly plays into them relatively well. Her Mystic defense is her strongest side, so that's definitely valuable. And then I believe their other thing is rerolls, which is also great as we've established. So yeah, she certainly gets some value there, and stuff like Mordo as well to support her and whatnot. That could be really, really useful. So yeah, she's got to play in a lot of different places. I think she's a very versatile model that's very, as we've said before with some other models, she's very independent. She can do her thing without really needing all that much support. So the models that can support her just kind of elevate her to another level, which is really nice to really nice spot to be in. I can English really well today, guys. As this video is already on the longer side, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about other specific characters she might synergize with. I've already mentioned a handful of them, but mostly through leaderships. But just to kind of sum up, I think anyone who has stuff that can help keep her alive, such as bodyguards or defensive rerolls, is pretty solid. Anyone who can turn up her damage to 11 with offensive rerolls or similar abilities is really, really good as well. And then lastly, mobility. Anyone that can help her get around the board is certainly something valuable to her. And there are definitely places where you can find access to multiple or even all three of those things. So I definitely recommend playing around with her if you haven't already. I think she's a lot of fun to play. I've only put her on the table a few games so far myself, but I'm definitely planning to get a lot more in with her over the next little bit because I actually just picked up my Scarlet Witch model recently, and she's so far been a ton of fun. She's an incredibly efficient murder piece, and yeah, she's one of those models where sometimes it's just fun to roll a bunch of dice and see things melt. So I think she's a really fun piece for stuff like that. But yeah, let me know what you guys think down below. Where are your favorite places to run Scarlet Witch? Did I miss anything? Is there anywhere she's really, really good that I didn't talk about, or any combinations or synergies that she has? I'd love to hear what you guys think. As always, if you guys enjoyed, please do drop a like down below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. We do character spotlights like these pretty much every week. We start to do some other things mixed in this time slot just because honestly, I'm starting to run out of characters I'm all that confident about, but we're going to be pulling in Reed sometime soon, and we'll start talking about some of the X-Men characters, so that'll be interesting. So if you guys are looking forward to that, do let me know. And also just if there's characters you want to see that we haven't talked about on here before, by all means, I'm open to suggestions. There are definitely some characters where I don't have any experience with them, so I don't feel like I can comfortably kind of talk about them. But if it's a character I've played before and I'm relatively comfortable with, I will definitely take consideration to any recommendations you guys have of characters you'd like to see. Because yeah, obviously, I'm making these videos for you guys, so if there's stuff you want to see, do it, let me know. But as far as this one's concerned, that is going to do it. So once more, I hope you guys enjoyed, and until next time, have a great day, everybody. Peace.